Good morning and good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for joining us today for the first ever, frankly speaking, video podcast. So
Good.
thanks. We really appreciate you attending today, whether you are virtual, whether you are live with us today or on some platform. We definitely appreciate you showing up and checking us out and doing all that. So today we're going to have a lot of fun talking all things Frank, which is cool. And so my name is Frank Gurnee. Here with me, I have Frank Raimondi. Frank, say hi.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, or really good morning if you happen to be listening from Australia. But
Yeah, Australia as a whole, it could be a different day, right?
yeah, it's already Thursday morning at 5 in the morning there. So
Right. Well, before we get started, guys, for those that are listening live or watching us live, we do have a questions tab on your screen there. If you have questions throughout this broadcast, feel free to throw those in there. Say hi to us. Pretty much anything you want to do, you can do in there. We will be reading off some of those questions live here on the air, and we will be answering those as we go through. Today, we're going to be talking about really super fun stuff, cybersecurity services, for MSPs and how you kind of get started in that whole world and where it's going and all kinds of fun stuff. So before we get started with that, if you can hear me okay and everything is great, you have a little hand raise button on your panel there. Just raise your hand to show me that you're hearing us okay and everything's working as it should be. I'm seeing hand raises there, so awesome. Really great to see everybody here today. So let's get started. Getting going here in cybersecurity services. And before we get started with that, I do want to just kind of introduce ourselves, tell you a little bit of background on us. So although we share, the similar names, similar hairlines, similar beards, we do have a lot of similar experience in the channel as well. But Frank, why don't you start us off with just telling us a little bit about your background and what you've been doing in the channel all these years.
okay, yeah, I'll start kind of where we're at today, where I'm at. So I'm for IGI Infinite Group Inc. and also Nodeware. I manage our alliances and partnerships and distribution, and been with the company a little over 3 years, 3.5 years or so, and so been there. And then before that, I've done way back when was really more of a hardware focused guy, and so worked at Apple Computer long ago, and then Intel, and actually a couple different stints at Intel, as well as some time at Cynix. So I've kind of got a wide range of vendor experience, and really focused on partners and sort of partnerships, really, and alliances and building that. So that's really my interest here, and we'll talk a little bit more and bring up some anecdotes as we go.
Very awesome. Yeah, and my name is Frank Gurnee, and I have been in the channel, gosh, 20 some years now, and started my career in telecom, so with a company called Covet Communications. So doing high-speed internet back when it was really cool, and then helped start a company called Chartech, which was still exists today as a training organization for MSPs. I was selling managed services back then, so I've been in those shoes, been out there selling that specific product line, so really understand that key component. Went to work for a company called Vertical Action, helped build that into a large web marketing company in the channel as well. Couple stints here and there, and now I'm with IGI Cybersecurity Services and Nodeware. So really excited to be here talking cyber stuff. So with all of that, yeah, let's jump into this topic, Frank.
Yeah, actually, one of the things I was sort of thinking of is this, beginning of the year is sort of a time when everybody's predicting and sort of, wrapping up summaries of the last year and looking forward. And one of the things I've seen a lot of, and I kind of, I'll bring it right into our topic today, is the predictions. I mean, there's the obvious ones around AI and what's that going to do, both for the good and for the bad. But I think one of the things where there's a lot of consistency is around, let's just call it compliance and cyber insurance, and sort of what insurance generally drives, again, whether you go back to seatbelts in cars or you know, uh, dozens of things, right, that are now just standard parts of a product, but they were really driven by the insurance requirements that the guaranteed profit makers in insurance companies have driven, because they want to reduce the risk, and that really is what we're, I think we want to talk about today, is how to reducing risk. And sort of as part of that is without having to really drive a ton of new resources within your company. And I think in
Yeah.
our next month's session, we're going to get a little bit more specific about how to add resources and how to build them into your play without having to add staff. But I think sort of related to that today is what kind of services will help you as an MSP help your customers be compliant, sort of look ahead towards compliance, or make sure they get their cyber insurance renewed. So
Yeah.
that's kind of
Yeah.
where
I
I'm
mean,
that's gonna be an interesting path, right?
right. And I think it's super interesting because, like, compliance, it can mean a lot of things to a lot of people. And it's really been confusing, I feel like, in the MSP space, especially, right? Because we've had a lot of kind of MSP influencers who've gone this route of CMMC and compliance and had good luck over time, but have gone out there and said, this is how you need to do your business and that sort of thing, without kind of saying, like, there's steps to all of this and what you have to do and how you get there and that sort of thing. I think managed services in itself has been pretty straightforward. It's pretty straightforward. The services that are in a managed service environment, you have your PSA tool, you have RMM, you have backup and disaster recovery, AV, some additional tools and things that you sell beyond that. But for the most part, that's like the bread and butter of a managed service organization, right?
Yep. Yep.
But when you get into cybersecurity services, I mean, it's just overwhelming. I mean, if you think about it, like, you got EDR, you got MDR, XDR, SOC, SIM, CISA, CISO, vCISO, CISSP, CMMC, NIST, FINRA,
Stop.
SOC 2, risk management. I mean, all of this stuff. And where do you start with all of that? I mean, I think
Yeah.
that's the biggest question, is like, I think MSPs recognize that they have to evolve into this next thing, which is adding cybersecurity services. But with all of that stuff, red team, blue team, purple team, what the heck? Like, it's just too much, right? How
Mhm.
do you know where to go and where to start? Like, what should these guys be thinking about, initially?
Yeah. Well, one of the things I think it kind of comes back, and again, the 2-second commercial here, right, is what Nodeware and IGI Cyber Services are really about, is sort of looking proactively in with services, and we'll get to those in a bit. But I think one of the first parts of that mix, and again, very overwhelming just based on the terms that you hear about. And if you go to a trade show, right, 90% of the booths say, "Oh, we provide all the security you need." And it's like, well, okay, that's BS. But what are there's so much there, and some things are overlapping, some things are, yeah, they do 2/3 of what I need, and this does another 2/3, but there's that 1/3 overlap. So why do I need both? If I'm, it's dizzying. But I think if you take a step back and look at what you need to be, you're an MSP, you're maybe you're doing some basic AV, maybe you've done some vulnerability management, maybe you've done um, a little bit of MDR kind of thing, and you have a partner that has a SOC that you use. But realistically, I think the play that is really relevant for adding, starting in that mix down the path, is looking for things that help you be more proactive, right? Helping you reduce the risk at the forefront, right? Because if you can do a thing like third-party risk management, or if you can do a penetration test and just see where that customer is, and it could be a basic electronic one that you just kind of do some fancy connections into the network, or you can do a true, comprehensive penetration test and on-site physical testing. And those, it comes back to understanding what your customer needs, but realistically sort of starting with that proactive approach. How can I reduce the risk? Those tools you'll add as you define what needs to be done, and you'll bring them in as you need. But I think overall, it's really sort of starting to take a look at, okay, if I add this, what does that do? Does that reduce the risk? Does that eliminate risk? Does that, get rid of bad systems that, are vulnerable, whatever?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. You're 100% right. And I think this is something that MSPs understand is this proactive versus reactive approach that goes all the way back to the beginning of managed services, how to sell managed services, and that we're selling on the idea of proactively providing services so that their systems don't blow up and that they are efficient and that they're continuously everything is working. But when we talk into the cyber world, I think where a lot of the confusion comes in is like, why do I even need this? Or why is this even a thing that I need to be either providing to my current customers or to broaden my spectrum into new customers? And what I think is that first and foremost, this is the next evolution for the MSP. If you look at the MSP in general, you're talking about, for the most part, 50 or less users in an environment that you're managing on an ongoing basis. And that's your opportunity for the most part. Because if you go beyond 50 or higher, and there's some cases out there where you're managing bigger clients than that, but they usually have an IT department, so it's hard to kind of get past those guys. Where I think cyber really changes that is, because of the compliance need, because there's so many larger businesses that have requirements around compliance, around cybersecurity, securing their networks, there's a big opportunity for MSPs to be almost an advocate or a secondary tier or piece of these larger organizations, your mid-size organizations who really don't have all the answers for cybersecurity, don't have the manpower. So I think that in that sense, providing these types of services gives you additional opportunity to move up a tier into that next level, out of just the small business and into that medium business. And on top of that, I think that for existing clients, what we're finding already is government requirements are coming down very quickly. So we've already seen, what I would say is almost the lowest tier of security frameworks, your FTC safeguard is hitting a lot more of industries, right? So
yeah, they're broadening the description of who's required for that.
Yeah, your accountants, and all, what you're going to see is this type of thing is going to get passed down to almost everybody at some point. So if you're proactive in what you're putting in place, I think that's one of the reasons you should be looking and doing this like now, right? Because you're ahead of the game. You're not behind and trying to catch up at that point. Does that make sense? Is that, you agree with that,
no,
Frank?
absolutely. Yeah, no, I think so. And I think maybe what we need to do is sort of, I think as part of these services, again, kind of a bit of a definitional element, right? I mean, there are, let's call them traditional solutions, MDR, XDR, SIM, right, that we kind of talked about. But I think those are programs that you can use. But I think if we let's lean into the services, right, which is kind of what can be added and what you can do without, again, the shameless plug here is, right, who can you go to add these services when you don't want, you don't have the capacity, you don't have the time, you don't want to have the time or the expertise on staff, but how can you add those into your mix and be the provider and your trusted provider on? So Frank, maybe go through, just let's define pen test and the CRM and all that.
So as we get into that, I think that it's really good to understand that this is not much different than when managed services came into play, right? Because when managed services was coming in and you had VARs and reseller and you had IT break fix companies, a lot of people didn't know how to start a managed service organization or what to do or what tools to use or even how to do any of it. And so there were a ton of companies that were providing different pieces of managed services, if not all of them, or the remote monitoring and management, taking the call, passing on or creating a ticket, that sort of thing. And now we're seeing the same thing, and IGI, that's who we work for, does something similar to that for folks who want to get into cybersecurity services. So things like, and we'll talk about each one of these, but penetration testing, SOC readiness, SOC 2 readiness, CMMC readiness, vulnerability management, compliance, all of these can be done for you to get you started down that road. And I always say, like, and you saw it in managed services, like people started there and then they moved in and hired their own techs, or got someone who was certified in this or that, and then started to move and do it on their own right over time. But in all of this, using a third party to help you start providing cyber services is an amazing concept and idea, because you can essentially use those guys to provide these services today. They have all the expertise, they're doing all the good stuff. You can put it on your website so you're not missing out on opportunities. You can have all of these services available to you, but you don't have to have the staff and everyone else today to provide that. So yeah, let's jump into some of those services that we think that they should be starting with today. And I think you mentioned a couple. I think penetration test is a really good place to start.
Good. Yeah, absolutely. So do you want to
Yeah.
define? Do you want me to?
Yeah. Why don't you throw it out there
Okay.
for us?
I'll take the first one, and I think that one of the things to differentiate that we have to do a lot of educating on still is a vulnerability assessment or management and penetration test. So assessments and management is the ongoing sort of the internal look at kind of readiness, if you will, right? What systems are there, right? Doing a good inventory, looking for vulnerabilities and remediating them. All right, and that's a continuous active program, a management program. Penetration test is, it's an attempt at an exploitation, right? It is an outside third party, and again, this is really where an MSP should not be doing it themselves, right? This is really a tool, a service that should be done from a third party, because otherwise it's kind of the fox watching the hen house of, my system was good, but anyway. So penetration test, think about is testing those systems, putting them through using the same tools that the bad guys and the hackers use, but with the white hat on, and sort of with the company's permission and knowledge that we're going to be trying to break into their system. And once you get in, how do you navigate through? And sort of that's what a penetration test will do. And it's also not just a electronic or a way to get around in the systems. It's also thinking about penetration from a physical site, right? Everybody's probably seen those little fancy boxes that can read the RFID signals and credit card numbers and all the rest of that. It's coming on site and seeing if the doors that the company has are protected properly, or if people are letting, because I've got a UPS shirt on, anybody can come in and deliver a package, right? It's all the little things that involve there. So that penetration test is really, again, just as a quick definition, is an outside effort to come in on site electronically or physically, exploit an environment, and then report out on that. And that report out is kind of the action list, right? It's as an MSP, you're going to get that report along with your end user, and you're going to make an action plan, right? And here's what we're going to attack, and here's what we're going to keep working on to improve before the next one.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that when we talk about these different services, like a penetration test is really a requirement in most security frameworks. So it's something that these folks have to check the box on these things, right? And I know there's been a lot of confusion in the space around what is a pen test, because there's people calling things pen tests which really aren't, right? And there's a lot of this kind of misrepresentation of what is actually being done. Is this kind of a pre-sales thing, or is it actually for compliance? And that's really the difference, right? So if somebody's calling something a pen test and it's really kind of to get you in the door for a pre-sales thing, that's not a true compliance.
Yeah, that's more of an assessment than a true test.
Right. So you're doing kind of some testing and some things to check things out. But a pen test really is a requirement in many of these security frameworks that you need to do. And one way that IGI kind of does this really well is they have a basic kind of pen test, which is a good starting place at a really good price. And then you can move into more custom or full on, attacks where, you've got award-winning, hacker types that are literally trying to, take down a network. And so, those are two very different levels, but there's a place you can start there, which, is affordable and stuff
Yeah.
like that.
Well,
Um,
and well, I
yeah,
just say that one of the things with that, right, is that it's not a cookie cutter thing, right? It's really a customized discussion. So it's a three-way conversation, most likely between you, the MSP, between you and your customer, and then a provider like IGI or another provider of a penetration test, right? You really need to be clear on what you're scoping and be clear on that, because there's too many definitionally, but also just physically and electronically what is in that realm that needs to be tested. So
I remember.
don't just hire up and say, hey, I need a pen test. Okay, here's the dotted
Yeah.
line. You need to have that discussion with the experts.
Yeah, I remember a couple of years ago when I was first kind of introduced to the whole penetration testing thing, and some of you as well probably have had this where you went out to get a quote on a pen test, and that quote came back at like $100 and something thousand. I was like, wow, this is insane. But now I think it's a lot better. That is a very specific thing for a very high level customer who probably can afford it now. But for your average client who needs security check marks to be taken care of, it's not going to be anywhere near that for their basic pen test any longer, which is nice. But that is a proactive piece. So as we talk about these services, that's where we kind of go to the vulnerability management, which is something every MSP can be doing today, because they have the knowledge, the breadth of knowledge to be able to manage vulnerabilities within a network. But vulnerability management really is an ongoing way to manage proactively people from getting into that network, right? Because if I'm looking at every day the different vulnerabilities that are coming up onto people's machines and that sort of thing, and I'm patching those and taking care of them, then if something happens to get to the network, hopefully I then have that next punch, which is like an endpoint protection to stop it from going any further. But if I'm doing that before, it never even gets there, right? So that's why vulnerability management is so important, is because if I just put EDR out there, then everything's getting to that network and it's hopefully stopping it 99, hopefully 100% of the time, but 99% maybe isn't good enough. Where if I'm doing vulnerability management and endpoint protection, well, I'm taking care of that first layer no matter what, and I'm managing that and making sure folks can't get there. If something does get past it, my percentage that it's going to get stopped is much higher at that point. Would you agree with all of that, Frank?
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, yeah, no, just move on. It's a violent agreement.
So yeah, I mean, so from a services standpoint, vulnerability management should be a standard, and that's not even a standard just for for regular compliance type clients, but your regular managed service clients, you really should be doing that for them, because it's going to give you a lot more insight into what's going on in that network.
Well, even just the basics of vulnerability management is identification of assets, right? You can't protect and secure what you don't even know is there. So that's what a good vulnerability tool will do, is make sure you know what your assets are, your devices, including IoT, right? I mean, this is not just systems and desktop device or scan. This is looking at everything. So yeah, you have to keep that, and that's why it really is a nice 1-2 punch between vulnerability management and pen testing. So
yeah,
so that's a good definition on that. So what's next one you want to cover? What's the next?
Yeah,
service?
I mean, I think risk management, I think, is important in vCISO services, because in those, a lot of MSPs have been hearing about vCISO. vCISO, that's like the next thing you need to be, or you need to be providing those types of services. At the end of the day, it all comes down to risk management. All of these things kind of fall under a risk management engagement, right? Because if you're talking about compliance for somebody, you need to be doing all of these things in some combination and reporting that and showing that all of these things are being done on a regular basis. Because as you know, it's not if a breach is going to occur, it's probably when a breach is going to occur. And we need to make sure that we have everything in place that if that breach occurs, one, we can show auditors, here's all the things we've been doing over time to get ourselves in the best position we can.
Right.
Because if you don't do that, they're going to come out after you with a really heavy hammer, right? But if you can show an auditor, like, look, we've been doing things proactively to get ourselves in the best position possible. Here's all the things we've been doing. We have a VCISO in place. We have, all these different things. We have a risk assessment we do on a regular basis, all of these things. Then at that point, they go, okay, well, you're doing everything you're supposed to be doing. This occurred. That's a bummer. Here's what you should be doing next in the future. They're a lot more lenient in that way if you can show them that you're doing best effort, right? Because nobody can do everything tomorrow. Nobody can do it all. You can't all of a sudden be compliant tomorrow. And compliance is an ongoing thing. It's something that is literally continuous. So yeah, I think that's kind of your next step in what you want to be doing is you want to be adding those vCISO type services to your service stack to provide to those clients that have those compliance needs.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts?
And that can, and that can be both internal, right? If you study and become strategic enough in your own business, then nice, you could add that as a service, or if you need to outsource it, then you can outsource it, right? And very fractional play. So if you need somebody for 10 hours a month, you can interview and you can sign a contract for that. So there's some good flexibility in that, because it's for, especially for a smaller company, it's not a full-time requirement, right? It's really, again, kind of that objective outsider's view on what's being done, where they're at, where they want to get to, and then what's the path to do that. That's really the CISO's value add in the mix. So think about those services, and again, we're going to provide a form at the end if you're interested to learn a little bit more or discuss them at the end, or discuss them after the call. Then we'd love to talk you through these a little bit and describe them some more. So so vCISO though can really set the path for what are those prioritized services that you need to add, right? You might need everything under the sun, but there's a CISO is going to say, here's the first two, get those done, get those underway, then we'll add these two. And again, as you say, you're not going to do it all at once. Both your customers aren't going to be able to handle it all at once. You're not going to be able to handle it all at once as the MSP delivering that. And so, we can go with just, again, getting back to your earlier point, right? You can't get there if you don't know where you're going. And exactly. Every journey starts with the first step. So get stepped up and get going on it.
Well, I think another service that comes up a lot in the MSP world is CMMC, right? And CMMC is this ever-changing, amazingly complex thing. And there's not a lot of people out there that truly have a good understanding or grasp on it. I think we were in a meeting the other day and they said there's something like 300 of this very specific type of person out there in the world, 300 that can do or understand this piece of CMMC
that are now required.
It's a requirement, right? There's 300 people, that's it, in the entire world. So I was amazed to hear that, but at the same time, this is something that has been coming up a lot in the MSP world. And again, I go back to, there's been a number of influencers in the MSP space that have talked a lot about CMMC. Well, things are changing rapidly. And so there's a ton of requirements around what the MSP, if they're working with somebody who has these government contracts and things, what they have to do and what kind of certifications they have to have or have in place. So I would say, if you're starting to think this way or you have clients that maybe fall into this, it's really something good to reach out to someone like IGI to say, where do I even start with this?
Yeah,
What can I
yeah,
do? How can you help me? Because it's overwhelming the amount of knowledge you have
yeah.
to truly do CMMs right.
Yeah, and again, it kind of goes back to this objectivity, right? Seeing the forest through the trees, or add your analogy of what um, there's just so many going on, and you're knee deep in it, right? And you're knee deep in this part, but you forgot about this part over here. So
Yep.
that fresh perspective, fresh eyes, is really kind of a critical element here to deliver and deliver value to your customer, right? I mean, if it's just you doing it all the time, then you're likely going to be missing something, and that's where an outside eyeballs can help.
Yeah, I mean, what I like about this model of, hiring a third party to provide certain cybersecurity services for you is just the fact that you can grow your business in this way and add people, bring it on yourself at some point as you gain more knowledge, as you get that CISSP certification, as you become certified vCISO, as you do those things. That's fantastic. And you can start taking on those layers yourself. But there's no reason you shouldn't have that you have the ability to do that on your website today, because if you don't, and I heard a story just earlier, I think you were talking to somebody the other day, Frank, and you asked them, hey, I see you do CMMC on your website, and they couldn't tell you anything about it. The funny part about that is I said, well, it's still smart that they have it there because they're not going to lose somebody who might have gone to their website and are looking for that service. They might call them up and say, hey, we're looking for CMMC help, right?
Mm,
Now they can come to someone like us, an IGI or somebody, and say, how can you help me with this? But they don't lose it. So having those
right.
services listed on your website, having a third party really keeps you from losing an opportunity that you might not have had.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I
Yeah,
thought that was an
good point.
interesting story.
Yeah. No, well, and there's a fine line there, right, between promising things or saying things that you have no clue about versus things that you at least understand the basics and know where to go when you need the expertise. That's really
Well,
kind
I
of what
would
we're.
at least want to have that third party in place that can help me, right? If
Yeah,
I'm going to
you
go
know
down
who
that
they are.
route,
You can turn
put
around
it on my
quickly.
website.
I mean, yeah, you don't want to have to, get an inquiry and then take a week to understand who to
Right,
contact. So.
exactly.
Actually, you know what? I as a quick break on the chat, I'll just mention for people listening that if you want to do some follow up and ask, we'll put this, we'll say it again. But if you want to write this down, nodeware.com/frankly speaking, and on there you can inquire about Nodeware, vulnerability management, or any of these services that we're talking about. So let's get on
Yeah.
to the next one, Frank, and we don't need to keep everybody on for the hour here. So what's the
Yeah.
next service you want to highlight that's of value
I
to
think
MSPs?
I think SOC 2 is one that comes up a lot, right? So getting ready for a SOC 2, that sort of thing, it can be very, very overwhelming, and that's a huge process as well, and has a lot of steps and a lot of requirements. Um,
Who's who's
if
who's
some
typically who's typically needing that? Maybe you can help define if an MSP's got, yeah, some customers really need it, some customers don't. Who's really looking for that mark?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I think most clients who need it know, right? So they're going to be the ones to tell you that, hey, I need a SOC 2. Can you help me with that? I don't know that it's like you can just um, market to folks like find a list of people who need a SOC 2, right? I don't know that it's that simple. I think it's the companies that have that requirement are going to know it, and they're going to let you know that. Unless you know additional industries or something that are very
No,
specific.
I was just sort of thinking of, is there verticals like healthcare or finance or, banking and, are there particular groups that if an MSP thinking, oh, I've got customers that maybe need that and they could reach out to them and say, hey, do you know what SOC 2 is? Are you requiring it or is it being required of you? And then that way, the MSP can say, oh yeah, well, by the way, I can help you with that visa these service
Yeah,
providers.
I think it's a good question to ask, and I think most people who know they need it know. But it does cover a lot of industries. I know even a lot of vendors like ourselves, like SOC 2 is a requirement for a ton of vendors. So I think it's one of those things that covers just a vast amount of folks out there, which does imply good opportunity,
Hmm.
right, to
Yeah.
the MSP out there to potentially help those clients with, creating a SOC 2, doing all of that stuff. So I think that's another of those services that you want to be able to list on your website. You want to have somebody who can help you facilitate that. At the end of the day, you're providing a service that you get help with, but at the end of the day, you're going to make money on, and it could put you in a position where you can present other solutions to those clients,
Yeah.
which is
Yeah,
really
absolutely.
nice.
Well, you're going to have to get there. So, okay. What's next? How about
Yeah, I mean,
third-party risk?
yeah. So yeah, third party risk is, I think that falls into this idea of how many vendors people have connecting to them, right? So when you think about that, and that 50+%, this, has come up a number of times, of breaches come through some type of third party connection. So you can be as secure as you want, but because X, Y, or Z company is connected to me, I get breached through them. That's a scary thought, because a lot of folks are tied into different, software solutions or other companies. So to be able to manage all the vendors very quickly, easily, and show your clients, look, these folks, I don't know if I'd be trusting them. They're not getting back to us on questionnaires, on assessments, that sort of thing. I think it's important, right?
Mhm.
All around. But you have any thoughts on vendor management as well, Frank?
No, I think it's, you got to look at it both from, supplying into your customer as well as their customer base, right? So it's kind of in and out from the customer, what they need to be understanding, what their risks are, and there. So, um, yeah, no, it's a growing. I mean, it's one of the latest NIST requirements that's been added is having a third party risk management program. So, um, again, that's something that I think that people should start looking into. And again, it may not be something you have to add right away, but when your customer is asking you about it, you need to at least know what it is and how you might be able to provide it as a service. But it is something that a lot of people today, your customers might be doing it just on spreadsheets and grunt work, if you will, of an admin or two that's pulling all the information about all your suppliers or all your customers and how protected they are, and that can be kind of quickly automated and put into a service instead. So
Yeah. So
yeah.
I threw a couple fun questions out here a little bit earlier, or actually I wanted to bring up one of those. So your take on this, Frank, and I'm gonna say this is kind of a trick question. So should MSPs be selling cybersecurity services? What do you think?
Ooh. Well, they need to be providing them. They need to be offering them. I mean, ultimately, it all does come down to a selling motion, right? But that selling motion is educating without fear, right? And without, the last thing you want to be doing is selling, FUD or fear, uncertainty, and doubt, because that just gets you into all kinds of, um, you know, promises made and maybe not promises kept. So,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah. So when I said this is a trick question, to me it's yes and no, and here's why. Yes, you should be providing, like you said, cybersecurity services. Should you have a salesperson who's going after those types of opportunities? Absolutely. But at the same time, what I'm really talking about here is the things, right? So when we talk about
mm,
selling cybersecurity services, should I be
yeah.
selling someone EDR,
Oh God,
MDR,
no. God, no. No.
SIM, vulnerability management? No, I mean, this goes back to the way we sell managed services, guys. You don't sell the things. I don't sell you RMM. I'm not selling you a specific thing. I'm bringing things together to provide you a service. And so when you talk about that, these things there are things that exist that are requirements that have all these pieces in play that you bring together for someone, but individually, never just try to sell someone vulnerability management, right? Never try to sell somebody, just an EDR, thing. It's not a thing to sell. It's more of peace of mind, as we've always done in managed service. The funny thing I always go back to is, man, this today to me is like 2008 in the managed service world. It's so the same. Like, it's the same things you've learned over time on how to sell managed services is the way you sell cybersecurity services. It's not on the things that you're selling them. You're not trying to sell them this specific. You're trying to sell them that peace of mind, that security, that compliance requirement.
Well, it's business support, right? You're selling them aids and tools that build their business, right, and keep their business
Right.
thriving.
Yeah,
So
and that includes
however you want to position that.
services. The stack of these services are the things that we bring together to provide that to you. So yeah, so that was a fun one. I really like that. Do you think compliance services are difficult for MSPs to provide?
Do you think what? I'm sorry, say that again.
You think compliance services are difficult for MSPs to provide?
I don't think so, right? I mean, in a way, it may be an educational opportunity, right? Some companies may just not know what their compliance requirements are, or a medical office may just think HIPAA is just keeping files protected, right? When there's a bunch of other things in that. So, compliance, as you said before, compliance is a big, complicated,
Yeah.
not necessarily ugly, but let's call it ugly scenario, right? Of a lot of things that you have to be cognizant of, and different types of verticals have different types of compliances. So,
Well, and this is where this was another kind of trick question, because honestly, compliance services, yeah. I mean, if you're just going to do it on your own and just figure it all out yourself, it's going to be a long, hard road. Now, if you can bring in, as we've been talking about, a third party, and whether that's IGI or not, to help you provide these services and have the expertise there to do that, it's going to be a much easier way to provide those types of services to your clients, because you're not going to have to go down that long road of education, of certification, of employees, of all of that stuff, right? And so that's where that was a little bit of a trick question, but I think you hit the nail on the head. I mean, really is one of those things. We talked about what the common kind of service stack looks like for most folks, what those 1-2 punches are. I think those are really, something to keep in mind as you're building this out. Every vendor out there is going to be telling you need this. What you need to look at it from is that proactive and reactive. So it should start with proactive, move into reactive services, and how do those kind of fit together and fit as a stack of services that you can provide. So think from that perspective, just like you do your managed services. You're not, you have that RMM there for your proactive stuff, and then you're putting in the other things for the reactive, right? The same kind of scenario falls into play there.
Yeah.
Where do you think most people are going in 2025? Is this still going to be a hard year of educating and getting people to understand that this is a road they need to go down, or do you think people are starting to get it and know?
I think people are starting to get it and probably get more scared, just given as the AI elements, right, kick in, both for bad and good. Hey, look at your phone and how many text messages you got over the last month that said your package hasn't been delivered. Please, contact us. It's, it just, so the in-your-face evidence is there. But I think again, going back to being an MSP that's adding value to their customers, that you're educating without scaring, right? You're providing solutions without running up your bill to them too crazily, right? Because there's going to be that risk balance, right, of the cost benefit or the cost risk analysis that your customers are really kind of concerned about. And you need to be an advisor, right? And this kind of goes, roll it back into the CISO element, right? There are pieces where you're going to need to understand the situation, understand the tools they have, what they don't have, and what should be added and could be added. There's a lot of good risk assessment tools out there that you can start with, right? Is some automated and some need a little bit more input, but you got to be helping somewhere, and otherwise they're going to go find somebody that can help them.
Yeah, and guys, there's no all-in-one tool, although that's what everybody's kind of searching for, is this tool that does all things. The problem with that concept in this world of cybersecurity is that if someone's doing a ton of things in a single tool, they're probably doing a ton of things okay, if not mediocre, right? For each one of these specific things. When you see a stack of tools that you're bringing together, you really want folks that are really doing what they know best in cybersecurity. And so that means bringing on multiple tools to help you, your GRC solution for figuring out, where you're at in a compliance, state for any specific type of framework or requirement. Vulnerability management, doing that and doing that really well. Endpoint protection, having something that does that. As you try to start to bring all these things into one platform, you really start to lose the ability for each of those to do each piece really well. So, just keep that in mind as you're going out there and looking and building out your stack of services, and then figure out, what do I really need to do? Like, which parts do I need to be managing, and what parts should I maybe be trusting to someone who has more expertise in that, and figure that out, right? Because that's another area that you can really, not get caught up in every single shiny new vendor toy out there. But with that, I know we have some questions that came in, Frank, so we can definitely hit some of those. We had a question that came in before the video podcast here. And the question was, what is the best way to show small business owners or decision makers that they need cybersecurity when they don't think that they do? And I'll let you start with that, and I'll give you my take on it as well.
Well, I think it's sort of a reality world, and just kind of back to the texting examples, right? You're seeing the attacks in every different angle, and just because you're small doesn't mean that you don't have value, right? I mean, you have customers, you have customer data, you have sales data, you have all kinds of different things that the way these tools work is that they're corporations effectively that are trying to do ransomware, trying to do break-ins and breaches. They can reach out to 1,000. If they hit one out of 1,000 in a day, that's a success, right? They've got somebody in. So you are not too small to be. You might not be a direct attack effort, right? They might not be going after you directly. Oh, I'm going to look for Joe's hardware store, right? But they're going to look for all 1,000 different small businesses that may have an open port or may have an access level in, and they don't care. They don't know if it's Joe or Jim's or Bob's or whatever, right? It's an IP address they're attacking. They're not attacking the business name. So you got to kind of start with that level of outreach.
Well, I think from a sales perspective, you really need to come up with your kind of list of questions to ask that customer. And I think it starts with something like, have you heard about X breach that has occurred, the Google breach or this breach, right? We're hearing about these all the time, right? You've heard about these, haven't you? I've heard about, every day it seems like in the news there's some new big company that has been breached. Now, I understand that you're not Google, But do you think it would be easier to breach you or Google? Right?
Yeah.
And, yes, they're attacking Google because there's the potential for, a large payday, but what if you were breached tomorrow and all of your client information was locked down? Would that affect your business? Right?
Yeah.
So asking a question like that can get someone to say, well, yeah, if I couldn't access my computers tomorrow, I would be down. I would not be able to do any work, right?
Yeah.
And so getting them to answer those questions in a way that you want them to answer them like that, and coming up with that question set, I think is going to take you down the road of them understanding why they need it. And why these are things that you need to do. At the end of the day, it still comes back to not selling cybersecurity things, right? It's more about what we do is we protect you. You hear about all these cyber threats out there. You see it in the news every day. What's great is we're helping to protect you from that. And we've put a number of things in place to help you do that.
Yeah,
And
it's focusing on the business outcome and the maintenance or the ability to maintain that business outcome over time.
Right. Again, what's great is we're able to help protect you from that. Is it 100%? No, but it sure is a high percent. And we're going to do everything we can to make sure that that doesn't happen to you. And if it does, we're going to have pieces in place to make sure we get you back up and get you taken care of right away. Right. So those are the things you want to do to help them in that sense.
Good point there. The other question I think we can bring up is about insurance and sort of the spending more to get insurance as well as spending more potentially to save on your insurance. So how do you sell that? And the quick answer is understanding again where their insurance play is today if they have it. And we've got a partner on the Nodeware side that is looking at, or that has a program for an MSP that if they're doing this set prescription of services, their premium will be X% less. And I don't want to quote it exactly, but because I don't know the exact number, but there is a way that you could say, hey, if you do these things that are going to cost you, let's say $1,000 a month, your premium insurance, which we're paying $1,000 a month, is now going to be $300 or $500 or some lower number. And you can say, hey, by spending here, you're reducing there, and you have to have that. So why not spend here? So it's a bit of more of a discussion, but happy to reach out or talk further on that to the person that answered the question or anybody else.
Yeah. Reach out via that link, nodeware.com/frankly speaking, and we can put you in touch with those folks. But yeah, I mean, I think cyber in itself, cyber insurance is a fantastic way to potentially open the door to providing your services to someone, because most companies need it, right? Most companies are either paying astronomically or getting denied or don't know if they'll get paid out, all of those things. So if you can come in with your stack of services, or you can say, hey, this is what we used to use back in the MSP days, saying, hey, let me see your telecom bills, right? Because I bet you I can bring in a master agent who could save you $800 a month on your telecom bills, and we can just use that to add our managed services in, and you've lost no money at all. You could do the same thing with cyber insurance today, where you can come in and say, we have a stack of services that are approved by this company who can save you X% on your premium and guarantee that you'll get paid out if something happens, and we'll pay for those services just there in the savings that you're going to have. It's a really great sales tactic to use to go in and say, here's what we can do to pay for our services for you, right? So I love that idea. I love the concept of that, because it just goes back to how we sold managed services for so long as well. We could provide a certain savings that paid for what we were doing, which is really great.
Yeah, cool. Okay.
Yeah,
I think that's it. I think let's wrap it up unless we've got anything else. I think we're good on the questions. Again, just nodeware.com/frankly speaking. If you'd like to follow up, please reach out, and you can give us a little information on what you're looking for, and we'll have a discussion. Frank, you want to bring up the next month's topic?
Yeah, we'll definitely be frank with you.
We'll be
How's
frank
that?
with you.
Yeah, let's see. I know we had some ideas. Did we have one kind of?
Yeah, I think it's how to be more supportive without adding resources and adding staff. So we're going to talk about kind of in the similar vein of adding security services without adding staff. This will be more, how do you build up your support team? And we'll have a guest on that one that'll talk a little bit more about options and models of adding support staff. So
Yeah,
we
awesome.
look forward to having you on. Come back. So appreciate everybody's attendance today.
Yeah, for sure, man. It's great to have everybody here, and we really appreciate you sticking around for us. Or well, we did almost an hour here, if not coming up on an hour. So super fun. And yeah, just reach out to us, nowhere.com, frankly speaking. Otherwise, we'll see you on the next one. Thanks, guys. Take care.
Have a great day, everybody.